ॐ नमो नारायणाय ॐ नमो नारायणाय
Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So after a long time, we're continuing on with our series on the Vedanta by V.S. Gate, I believe. Let's have a look. I think we're still sort of we've finished the introduction, and we're going to talk about the different schools of Vedanta in summary form. So there are 5 schools of Vedanta which are dealt with in this book. So which he considers to be the main ones. So let's have a look. So the doctrine of Shankara, the 5 schools of Vedanta. The doctrine of Shankara, Shankara's doctrine, which is usually known by the name Keval Advaita, or absolute monism. Kevala means absolute, and Advaita means non-dualism or monism, may be summed up in the 4 Sanskrit words Brahma, Satyam, Jagan, Mithya. Means that Brahman, or the spirit, is real. Jagan means Jagat. It means this world. Mithya is false or illusion. It is only intelligence without form, without qualities, without any limitations. He's talking about what Brahman is. Brahman is everything, or the supreme, or spirit. It is only intelligence without form, without qualities, without any limitations of time, space, or causality. That is real, and the unity, which according to Shankara is the substratum of all ephemeral and empirical plurality, is itself without the slightest touch of plurality. It is unity absolute, and as such, the highest thought of humanity cannot go any further. The greatest merit of Sankara's system is his most successful attempt to reconcile the mutually contradictory texts of the Upanishads. In other words, to reconcile bold idealism with which is the result of introspection, with the realism which ruthlessly insists on forcing itself upon us from outside. This he does by the introduction of Maya, otherwise known as illusion, right, in his system, and also Ajnana, or ignorance. And his doctrine has always 2 aspects, esoteric and exoteric. So be it in reference to theology or cosmology or psychology, the world around us consists of souls of limited knowledge and of a non-sentient matter. And if we once admit the existence of a supreme spirit, which with unlimited powers and intelligence, omnipotent and omniscient, as do all the schools of Vedanta and other orthodox schools also, how can we explain the creation of souls of limited knowledge and of objects without intelligence from this omniscient spirit, except as a result of ignorance or nescience, which puts limitation on the unlimited intelligence of this spirit? That there exists such ignorance is in fact not only mentioned in the revealed texts, but is a matter of ordinary experience, as when one gives expression to one's consciousness of one's ignorance, when one says, I am ignorant, I don't know something. So if this consciousness is true, well, it is a proof of ignorance. If it is not true, so much the better proof it is of ignorance. So that's an interesting last sentence there. If this consciousness is true, so then the consciousness that I'm ignorant, right? Then this is a proof of ignorance. And if it's not true, so much better proof of ignorance, right? Thus, esoterically, the Brahman, or the Supreme Spirit, is knowledge or realization itself without qualification and without the possibility of change. Exoterically, it is qualified, possessed of an infinite number of auspicious attributes, capable of producing this world from itself and reabsorbing it in itself. In brief, it is called Ishvara, or the controller, right? Like that. So creating something out of itself and then absorbing it back into itself. This is one of the Sanskrit definitions of Brahman that's given from Taittiriya Upanishad, Yatova imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayantya visham vishantiti. That from which everything emanates, that by which everything is maintained, and that into which everything enters, that is Brahman. So that's from the Upanishads, Taittiriya Upanishad. That's one definition of Brahman like that. So he's explaining that like there. There also another analogy given in the Upanishads is like a spider that spins a web. It creates the spider web out of itself, but it also takes that spider web back into itself, like that. So the exoteric cosmology, according to the natural but erroneous realism, right, which he calls avidya or ignorance, right, is in which we are born, considers the world as real and can express its entire dependence on Brahman only by the adoption of a myth, that is, the creation of the world by Brahman, implying thereby a temporal character of this creation. But so he says that the creation, because the world is actually an illusion, so therefore the whole idea of creation is a myth. But this goes against the doctrine of the transmigration of souls, that is without a beginning. So to reconcile the two, Shankara teaches that the temporal character, the temporal character does not belong to the creation forever, but that there are long periods for which the world is created and after which it is reabsorbed by Brahman, and that this succession of creation and reabsorption lasts for eternity, so that no creation may be regarded as the first. This never ceasing creation is a moral necessity. It is neither for God's glorification nor for his particular amusement, nor is it created out of his love of mankind. This explains the theory of karma, right, of reincarnation and karma, and of samsara being the repetition of birth and death. So over and over again. So which goes on endlessly as the sprout grows from the seed, which in its own turn grows from an earlier sprout, and so on. So there's without any beginning. The esoteric cosmology, however, says that all this is a mere appearance of truth. The manifold world is only an illusion, maya, a mirage, Mriga Trishnika. Mriga Trishnika. Okay, so Mriga Trishnika. Mriga means of deer. Trishnika. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. But anyway, he says a mirage, like a dream. And the reality is to be attained not by reasoning, tarka, right? Reasoning or logic or rationalization, but by introspective realization, anubhava, right? If you return from this variegated world to the innermost, it should be, recesses of your soul, the Atman, you will be aware of a reality which can very properly be described as timeless, spaceless, and changeless. The same thing was said by Plato, according to whom this world is a world of shadows and not of realities. And the same thing has been said by Kant, to whom the world is an appearance only and not the thing in itself. What was arrived at by intuition by Shankara and Plato and Kant has demonstrated by an analysis of the human mind, showing that the three essential elements of the outside world, that is space, time, and causality, are not as we naturally believe them to be, and as the other orthodox schools of Vedanta also admit, eternal fundamentals of an objective reality, but merely subjective, innate, perceptual forms of our own intellect. According to the esoteric psychology, the jiva, or the Atman, the individual soul, is Brahman, is the supreme spirit, right? Itself in full and total possession of eternity, omnipresence, omniscience, etc. But these godly qualities lie concealed within it, as fire is concealed within wood, and will appear only after the final deliverance, or moksha, or liberation from the illusion Maya or ignorance Ajnana, nescience. Exoterically, this concealment of the divine nature is due to the external adjuncts or upadhis. Upadhis, the mind, manas, the sense organs, indriyani, and the vital airs, pranaha, which form the subtle body, or what's also called the shukshma sharira. The whole psychological apparatus, together with karman, accompanies the soul in all its migrations without essentially infecting his godly nature. These upadhis, of course, form part of Maya and are due to the avidya, which is innate in man. And so we have some comments. The reason for creation will unfold in the text, probably. I don't know that Shankara actually gives a reason for creation, but anyway, let's see. But whence comes this avidya, the primeval cause of ignorance, sin, and misery? No satisfactory answer has been given to this question, or rather, the question itself must be regarded as inadmissible, for causality cannot go further than the samsara, and beyond it we know nothing. So the question is what's the cause of this avidya, this ignorance, this nescience, this maya, this illusion? So what is the cause of that? Because if we say that there is only one thing, and there's only one thing which is Brahman, and Brahman is omniscient, is knowing everything, then how can it suddenly have nescience? How is that created? How the nescience became created of the Maya? So from the conception of rewards in heaven and of punishments in the dark regions of hell contained in the hymns of the Rig Veda, there arose the theory of samsara, teaching rewards and punishment in the form of a new birth on earth. The Vedanta thus exoterically admits of a threefold division of men: those who perform good deeds, sacrifices, etc., and follow the path of the fathers, Pitriyana, and are born again; those who worship the qualified Brahman, following the path of the gods, Devayana, and are on their way to final deliverance; and lastly, those who are evildoers, who have a third place, Tritiya Sthana, which just simply means third place, reserved for them, which I guess means hell. So those who follow certain deeds, and they follow the Pitriyana, and they go to Pitri Loka, and those who go to moksha, and those who don't. Esoterically, however, the only reality is Brahman, and the knowledge of it is moksha, or liberation from the ignorance. Shankara's system, as opposed to the Parinama doctrine, maintains the Vivarta or Vaivarta doctrine, according to which all effects are only superimposed upon the cause, which alone is real. Okay, so the Parinama doctrine, to give an example, you have clay, and a potter makes a bowl, or a jug out of clay, or makes a pot out of clay. So the pot is not reality. According to the Vaivarta doctrine, everything is only clay. Everything's all clay. So according to the Parinama doctrine, though everything is clay, still the pot is something which is created for a certain time, has a certain shape and a certain purpose, and therefore, so some people look at the creation of the world and the souls as emanating out of Brahman, right, out of the Supreme, and having a distinct difference, having a distinct existence, distinct in some ways, but not distinct in other ways. So the Vaivarta doctrine doesn't say that. It says whatever you see, if you think that the pot is separate from the clay, or has distinct features, then that is just an illusion, but actually it's all just clay. So the well-known phrase Tattvam Asi, which means Tattvam Asi, So tat, that you are, is what it usually means in direct translation from Sanskrit. That tat, tvam, you, asi, are, that you are that, or that you are, that thou art, as sometimes they say. Cannot be taken literally as Balaba. We're going to read about Balabacharya. He's also one of the acharyas of the different sampradayas, the other Vedantic sampradayas. And so cannot be taken literally as Balaba does it, but must be understood as Jahad Ajahat, Lakshana, Jahad Ajahat. Lakshana. Lakshana means is a defining quality like that. And I don't exactly know what this Jahad. Jahad means from something from something else. Jahad Ajahat. I don't know. Thus, Tat literally means the Brahman with omniscience, omnipresence, absence of limitations. Tvam literally means the Jiva, right, with limited knowledge and powers, and the copula, the word putting them together, asi, which equates them, right, the word to be, right, tat is tvam, right, asi is the verb to be, right, so signifies the apposition or samanadikaranya, right, or the equality of the two, of these two. Right. Now, this is not possible in the full literal sense. What is incompatible in the connotations of the two terms is therefore to be rejected. Ahat. Oh, so this is what jahat means. So jahat means to reject, and ajahat means not to reject, to retain. So is therefore jahat. So this is an understanding here, a lakshana. The quality here is that the thing that's being trying to be understood is some of it is rejected and some of it is not rejected. We arrive thus at the idea of intelligence, pure and simple, indivisible, and without attributes. So you come to that conclusion by this understanding. The philosophical part of Shankara's doctrine may therefore be summed up as follows. 1. A plurality is false or unreal and superimposed upon one pure eternal Brahman, which is all-pervading. And it is Maya or illusion which makes us see plurality where there is unity and which itself has no independent existence. 2. The individual soul is really nothing but Brahman. 3. Knowledge in the form of the actual realization of the identity of these two is the only means to moksha. Right, so that's his summed up in Shankara's doctrine. The practical part of the doctrine amounts to this. Actions must be performed only to purify the mind so as to make it fit to acquire the knowledge that this identity of Brahman and Jiva. But afterwards, they must be all given up, since without a complete abandonment, right, in Sanskrit, that's called samnyasa, right, of all actions, moksha is impossible, liberation is impossible without the abandonment of actions. So the idea is the initial stage in Advaita Vedanta or Kevala Advaita Vedanta, right, is that one should perform actions to purify the mind until he can understand that the Jiva and Brahman are one. But once he understands that, then he should abandon all forms of action, right? Give up all forms of action because it's an illusion. So all of these things are done, all of these actions or karmas are done to purify the mind, right? But ultimately, they're all given up once the mind becomes pure enough to understand that Brahman and Jiva are one. Right. So without the complete abandonment of those actions, ultimately, the Advaitins say that moksha or liberation is impossible. For action and knowledge are opposed to each other like darkness and light, according to the Advaitis. So this is what is called the nivritti marga, the path of renunciation, or jnana nishta, taking our stand on knowledge. So that's very, very succinct understanding of Shankara's idea. Now we come to the idea of the doctrine of Ramanuja. The main thing which distinguishes the doctrine of Ramanuja from the rest of the Vedanta schools is that the individual souls and the inanimate world, essentially different from themselves, right, form at the same time the body and mode or attribute of the Supreme Spirit. This is called Sharira Shariri Bhava. And as such, they are incapable of an existence independent of the Supreme Spirit. This is what gives the doctrine its name of Vishishta Advaita. So non-duality qualified by duality. That's his translation. I would say specific non-duality, or non-duality of the Supreme Spirit, which is qualified by the individual souls and the inanimate word. That's a much better translation of Vishishtadvaita than the first one. So thus, what the ordinary body is to the individual soul, so are the intelligent and non-intelligent worlds of the Supreme Spirit to the Supreme Spirit. And just as the body can never be essentially the same as the soul, so chit and achit, chit being the soul, the jiva, the individual, meaning chit meaning knowledge, and achit meaning or consciousness, and achit meaning unconsciousness or ignorance, right? That means material matter, right? Can never be essentially the same as Brahman. It is in this way that Ramanuja's doctrine reconciles the various statements of the Upanishads regarding unity and plurality. So we see that in the Upanishads, there are statements that say that talk about the unity of these three tattvas or three aspects or three principles, Ishvara, right, the controller of God, right, Atma, or Jiva or Chit, and Achit, the individual soul, and achit or matter, like that, unconscious matter, like that. So these are described in the Upanishads either as one, having certain aspects of unity, and have certain aspects of plurality, where they're at one and the same time, they have some aspects of that in common, and some other aspects which set them apart from each other. So the Brahman or Supreme Spirit of the cause, both material and efficient of the universe, intelligent and non-intelligent, it is possessed of an infinite number of auspicious attributes, of which omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence, and bliss are the most essential. Unconditioned existence, eternal, limitless, and uniform knowledge, and an absence of all limitations of time, space, and causality distinguish it from the individual souls and the inanimate world as well. Brahman, at the same time, absolutely void of evil attributes, and it is thus that Brahman is sometimes described as qualified and sometimes as non-qualified. See Sutra 3. Sutra 3.2. So 3.2 would be referring to Brahma Sutras, the third chapter, third adhyaya, second 3.2.11, it says here. Anyway, so the creation of the universe from Brahman is not a production of something new. It is only a change of attribute or condition. It is a mere modification of that which is subtle into that which is gross. Thus, Brahman having for its body and mode the chit conscious and the achit unconscious, right, matter in their subtle condition is the cause, while the same Brahman having for its body or mode the chit and achit in the gross form is the effect. Similarly, the destruction of the universe is nothing but the becoming subtle of that which is gross. The individual soul is the subject of consciousness or knower and not mere consciousness itself. It is, however, often called consciousness simply because consciousness is its essential attribute. Even in the state of dreamless sleep, though there is no consciousness of objects, still the sense of I or aham artha, right, persists. I think, therefore I am, right? So knowledge is intuitive by nature and does not necessarily depend upon the senses. Bliss, right, is also another essential attribute of the individual soul. It has also the power to act, or kartritva. It can be an actor, it can be an agent, which, according to the Sankhyas, right, the Sankhya is one of the 6 Saddarshanas, right, and it deals with system of creation and different elements, and basically it's like Vedic type of science, counting things. Sankhya means to count. So categorizing things in material nature. So it belongs to, so it is also has the power to act, kartritva, which according to Sankhya belongs to prakriti, or material nature, but according to Shankara, to buddhi, to intelligence. The individual souls, in the state of their pristine purity, possess all the auspicious qualities in common with Brahman, which is the reason why the jiva is often described as being identical with Brahman. But they differ from it in 2 points. One, they have no power whatsoever on the movements of the world, whose creation and control belong exclusively to Brahman. 2, they are atomic in size, while Brahman is all-pervading. Being atomic in size, the individual souls are infinite in number and different for different bodies. Owing to ignorance, the individual souls are conjoined to matter, and thus, in spite of their original resemblance to Brahman, they suffer. Right knowledge of the nature of Brahman, from which results devotion or bhakti, brings the soul to liberation when it is restored to its original purity and bliss. But even then, it does not lose its individuality. Thus, tattvam asi, right, does not mean that the jiva is essentially and absolutely the same as Brahman, but the apposition is to be understood metaphorically as when we say the jar is white, gataha shuklaha, where the quality and the qualified stand in apposition to each other. In other words, we can't separate them. We can't separate whiteness from the jar. If we have a white pot, right? It's white and it's a pot. Part of it is, in essence, the thing is a pot, right? But it has this attribute of being white. It's got a white color. So thus, the jiva, which is an attribute or mode of Brahman, is Brahman in the sense that it is very similar to it in nature and is part and parcel of it. The inanimate world, on the other hand, is also as real as Brahman and the individual souls, and is essentially distinct from both. At the same time, it forms an attribute of Brahman and so cannot exist independently of it. Okay, so we have another comment here. So Ramanuja says that the call of the jiva to bhakti comes through the device of suffering inherent in material existence. Okay. I think what he's not addressing the fact that there may be souls that are omniscient, they're in Sri Vaikuntham. So we haven't discussed that. So those souls also, but naturally there has to be knowledge. There has to be knowledge. The jiva has to get free from ignorance. Otherwise, there can't be any understanding of how to perform bhakti. So with bhakti comes with knowledge. So anyway, so thus for Ramanuja, Brahman, Chit and Achit, right? So Ishvara, God, Chit, the souls, and Achit, matter, are 3 entities individually distinct from each other, all equally real, at the same time, all forming a unity in the sense in which the self and its body form the unity. So just like we have a soul and we have a body, we have a subtle body, we have a gross body, and we have a soul. All those 3 together are combined together in this material world, like that. So similarly, God is like that. God is the totality of everything. he also included within him are also included the souls and the matter, like that, as part of him. But those souls and matter can't exist separately from him, just like the body, material body and mind can't exist without the soul being in the body. So without the soul animating my body, when the soul leaves my body, then my body dies. So it's completely my material physical body. The gross body is dependent upon the soul in that sense. So similarly, the individual jivatmans and matter, the universe, are dependent on God. They're always dependent on God. Ramanuja admits the Parinama doctrine, again, the doctrine of transmutation of Brahman into the souls and the universe. Or the Satkaryavad, it can also be Parinama, transmutation can also be understood as Satkarya. Whereas Shankara says everything is mithya or illusion, Ramanuja says it's all Satkarya, it's all reality, it's real, it's all real. So, which maintains that the effect is nothing but a modification of the cause in which it is already present. So the pot, yes, the pot is clay, but the pot has its own distinct, purpose and its own distinct form and its own distinct existence from the lump of clay that it was made from. So much for the philosophical part. The practical part of Ramanuja's doctrine may be summed up thus: the devotion to Vasudeva, right, Vishnu, Narayana, is the only means of obtaining moksha or liberation. This bhakti is not knowledge, but it is a result of knowledge. It is not belief, which is at the best a subsidiary preliminary to bhakti. It is not work, for work is selfish. It is not the intuition or immediate presentation arising from any steady remembrance, Dhruva Shmriti. So Dhruva Shmriti, which Ramanuja explains, is like the uninterrupted Dhruva Shmriti. So Dhruva means deep, Shmriti means remembrance, and Dhruva means continuous remembrance or deep remembrance. Like the uninterrupted flow of oil from one container to another as a result of meditation. That's right. So this is called Dhruva Shmriti. So actions are necessary only for the origination of knowledge, but no further. Thus, the function of actions which Ramanuja is secondary or subordinate, as with Shankara. So both Shankara and Ramanuja have this in common, that they say that the performance of actions are in this material world are secondary. Ramanuja's doctrine, as with the other Vedanta schools, is based on the three prasthanas, or the three primary texts, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutras, to which must be added the Vishnu Purana, which is one of the 18 Mahapuranas, the only one which was authored by Vedavyasa's father, and not Vedavyas. It's by Parasara Rishi, which occupies a very important place in his doctrine and from which the Sribhashya quotes very frequently. So that is Ramanuja, the doctrine of Nimbarka. According to Nimbarka, there are only three principles or entities: Chit, the intelligent worlds; Achit, the non-intelligent world. So Chit meaning the jivas, the intelligent worlds; Achit, the matter; and Ishvara, the Lord or the Supreme Spirit, also called by the significant names of Bhoktri, the enjoyer, in brackets the jiva here; Bhogya, the enjoyable matter, right? And Niyantri, the controller or ruler. Okay, so this is similar to Ramanuja, and even Shankara has the idea of Chit, Achit, and Ishvara. Here, he's just giving some different names to it. He's calling the jiva as Bhoktra, as the enjoyer; Bhogya, matter, as being the enjoyable; and Niyantra, the controller of both, right, as the ruler or Ishvara, like that. So anyway, we can say Chit, Achit, and Ishvara. Just we can remember those. Chit, or the individual soul, is of the nature of knowledge, jnana swarupa. It is not the phenomenon of knowledge in the sense in which Shankara understands it. In other words, the jiva is able to know without the help of the sense organs. And it is in this sense that that words like pragyana gana and swayam jyotihi or jnana maya as implied to the jiva are to be understood. Okay, so we can think of this as like a lamp, right? A lamp is when you light the lamp is self-luminous, is self-luminous. A lamp is self-luminous. It's letting off light by which other things are to be known, but it itself is also known by that light. So the soul is like that. So in Ramanuja's parlance, this is called Dharma Bhuta Jnana. Anyway, so here he calls it Pragyana Jnana or Swayam Jyotihi, self-effulgent Jnanamaya. Jnanamaya, I'm not sure what that means. Jnanamaya is two separate things. Jnana is in knowledge and ignorance. Okay, so as applied to the jiva are to be understood. The jiva is a knower also. So that was understood before in the last section, right? And he can be both knowledge and the possessor of knowledge at the same time, just as the sun is both light and the source of light. Thus, the soul, who is knowledge and his attribute knowledge, though they are both identical as knowledge, can be at the same time different and related as the qualified dharman and the quality dharma. Right? Just as the sun and his light, though identical as light, taijasa, are still different from each other. Thus, there is both a difference and non-difference between the dharman and dharma, like the sun and its light. And the extreme similarity between them implies not necessarily their absolute identity, but only a non-perception of their difference. Not an absolute identity, but a non-perception of their difference. The jiva is also ego or aham artha. This ego continues to persist not only in the state of deep sleep, because our consciousness immediately after getting up from sleep is of the form, I slept happily, I slept well, or I knew nothing, but also in the state of liberation, right? So the ego continues, the self continues in the state of liberation. It even belongs to the Parabrahman, the Supreme Brahman. Hence, it is that Krishna, right, the speaker of the Gita, and who is also an avatar of Vishnu or Narayana, right, who is giving the knowledge to Arjuna in the Gita, refers to himself so frequently in the first person in the Gita, of which the chief object is thus Purushottama, the Supreme Person, who is omniscient and at the same time non-different from the ego or asmad artha. The jiva is also essentially active or katra, which we saw in Ramanuja's doctrine too. This quality belongs to it in all its conditions, even after release or in liberation. And we can see for this Brahma Sutra chapter 2, 3, 33. Those passages which deny this kartritva or doership of the soul only imply that the kartritva is not independent or swatantra. The jiva is also an enjoyer, right? Bhoktri, essentially of all its conditions. For his knowledge and activity, however, the jiva depends on Hari, the Supreme Lord, Srimad Narayana. Thus, though resembling him in being intelligent and the knower, he is at the same time distinguished from him by his dependence. This quality of dependence and of being controlled, or niyamyatva, right, is the very nature of the jiva, even in the state of release, just as niyantritva, the quality of being the controller, forms an eternal nature of Ishvara or God. The jiva is atomic in size, and at the same time, his attribute, knowledge, is omnipresent, which makes it possible that he can experience pleasure and pain in any part of the body. See Sutra 2, 325. Just as, for instance, the light of a lamp can spread far and wide and illuminate objects away from the lamp. Jivas are different and in different bodies, and so are infinite in number. The jiva has his true form distorted and obscured owing to his contact with karma, resulting from ignorance, which is beginningless, but which can come to an end in moksha or liberation by the grace of God when his true nature is fully manifested. The achit, or the non-intelligent world of matter, is of three kinds: aprakrita, or not derived from prakriti, or primordial matter, such as sun-like refulgence of Ishvara, his abode, Sri Vaikuntham, his ornaments, etc. These are aprakrita, non-prakriti, non-material, let's say. Two, prakrita, derived from prakriti or material nature, consisting of the three qualities of sattva, rajas, and tamas, goodness, passion, and ignorance, such as prakriti, mahat, ahankar. These are all the 24 principles explained by the Sankhya's, right? Different elements. And the third, kala, or time, is put in a different category. These three categories, in their subtle form, are as eternal as the chit, or the individual souls, jivatmans. The third principle is the highest self, the Brahman, or Krishna. This Krishna is naturally free from all faults, such as ignorance, egoism, passion, hatred, attachment, right? All these negative qualities, which Ramanuja also rejects that the Supreme has. There, he's and that is the true meaning, right? According to the Vaishnava Vedantins, the true meaning of nirguna. Not that the Lord has no qualities or no aspects or no attributes, but he has no negative attributes. He has no horrible attributes like ignorance, egoism, passion, hatred, attachment. Okay, so this Krishna is naturally free from all faults. In the store of all, is the store of all beneficent attributes, is adorable by all, has four forms, which are called vyuhas, right, which are mentioned in the Pancharatra, that is, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, and appears under various incarnations like Matsya, Kurma, etc., the different avatars. This Brahman, this Brahman is both the upadana, the material cause, right, like clay is for a pot, right, and the nimitta karna, the efficient cause, like the potter is for the pot of the universe. Both, the Brahman is both the efficient and the material cause, the material and the upadana and the nimitta karna. So it is the material cause in the sense that it enables its natural shaktis or capacities or powers, that is, the chit and achit in their subtle forms, to be manifested into gross forms. And it is the efficient cause in the sense that it unites the individual souls with their respective actions, fruits of actions, and means of enjoyment. Thus, the creation of the universe is nothing but a manifestation in a gross form of what was subtle before, and is thus a sort of modification or parinama. So we're talking about here, we're talking about Balaba, right? Nimbarka. We're talking about Nimbarka. Excuse me. So I'm sorry. Where were we up to? This Brahman is both the upadana, it is the material cause in the sense that it enables natural capacities or shaktis, the chit and the achit in their subtle forms to be manifested in gross forms. And it is the efficient cause in the sense that it unites the individual souls with the respective fruits of action and means of enjoyments. Thus, the creation of the universe is nothing but a manifestation in a gross form of what was subtle before, and is thus a sort of modification or parinama, which we saw in Ramanuja's philosophy too, parinama vard, and not to say that the universe is only superimposed on the Brahman and hence an illusion, Vaivarta, right, is against all reason. So Nimbarka also disagrees, as does Ramanuja, with Shankara on this point. For it is only a thing actually existing elsewhere that can be superimposed upon another thing where it does not so exist. So this is a nice argument by Nimbarka, that only So if you're talking about superimposition, there must be a real thing which is superimposed upon the other thing. So this is one of the arguments against the idea that Maya or Agyana is superimposed. This is the theory, the doctrine of Adhyasa or superimposition of Shankara, that Maya is imposed upon Brahman. But how can Maya be, which doesn't exist, according to Shankara, be superimposed? Only something which actually exists can be superimposed upon something else. So what is the mutual relation between these three principles, Chit and Achit, and Brahman described so far? It cannot be absolute identity, as Shankara says, and non-distinction, because it would contradict those passages in the Upanishads that speak of a difference between them, between these three principles, right? Chit, Achit, and Ishvara. So, and it would involve a mutual confusion of the nature and attributes of these three principles, although they are distinct from each other. Nor can the relation be one of absolute difference, for that would go against the passages like Tattvamasi Aham Brahmasmi, Sarvam Vai Kalvidam Brahma, etc. These are famous Upanishadic passages that say that there's an underlying spirituality or spiritualness of all things, and besides, so which links all things. And besides, Brahman, if it is quite distinct from Chit and Achit, would cease to be all pervading, right? So because if Brahman is all pervading, then it's not distinct from the jivas and from the material world. Only if it's co-dwelling and not pervading those things can, but then Brahman itself is not all pervading, because if you say that Brahman doesn't pervade the soul and doesn't pervade matter, then what are you saying? You're saying there's three separate, completely separate entities. So this idea that there are three separate entities goes against the very principle of Brahman being all pervasive. Okay, so now, nor can we say that it is a non-difference which exists in reality, and that the differences we see are all due to upadis or limiting adjuncts, right? For in that case, Brahman would cease to be pure and would be susceptible to the faults of the upadis. It would experience pleasure, pain, hatred, etc., and it would undergo modifications, all of which are contrary to its real nature. Hence, the truth is that both the difference and non-difference are equally real, right? The Chit and Achit are different from Brahman, inasmuch as they are described by the Shruti, the Vedas, right, as possessing attributes and capacities distinct from those of Brahman. At the same time, they're non-different from Brahman in the sense that they are absolutely dependent on it and cannot have an independent existence by themselves. Thus, Beda, or difference, means the possibility of an existence which is separate. At the same time, dependent, paratantra, satabhava, while abeda, or non-difference, means the impossibility of an independent existence, swatantra satabhava, right? Thus, in the sentence, tattvamasi, the word tat signifies Brahman, which is omniscient and omnipotent and of independent existence, the self of all. The word tvam signifies the individual soul, which depends on the existence upon Brahman, for its existence on Brahman. And the word asi is the copula, signifying the relation between the two, which is difference, not consistent with non-difference, not inconsistent with non-difference, and which can be illustrated by the relation between fire and its sparks, or that between the sun and its light or its luster. So yeah, it's very similar to Ramanuja, right? So to attain deliverance or liberation or moksha, the jiva has to commence with a complete submission to the Paramatma or property, right? Surrender, whose six constituents are a resolution to yield, anukulyasya sankalpa, the avoidance of opposition, pratikulyasya varjanam, a faith that God will protect, rakshasiti titi vishvasaha, acceptance of him as a savior, gop tritva varnam, throwing one's whole soul upon him, atmanikshepaha, and a sense of helplessness, karpanya. Not necessarily in that order, but anyway, those are the six qualities of property, which also is accepted by Ramanuja. So God's grace extends itself to those who are possessed of these six constituents of property, that is, who are a prapana, who is a follower of this property, and by that grace is generated bhakti, consisting of special love for him, which ultimately ends in the realization, shakshatkara, right? One-on-one realization of the Paramatman, or the Supreme. For a devotee, the knowledge of the following five is quite necessary. So, the first, number one, the nature of the Supreme Soul. Number two, the nature of the individual soul. Number three, the fruit of the grace or moksha, which is an uninterrupted realization of the nature and attributes of Brahman following from the absolute destruction of all actions and the consequent extinction of all nescience or ignorance. 4, feelings of enjoyment consequent on bhakti. And 5, the nature of obstacles in the way of the attainment of God, such as regarding the body and the mind as the soul, depending on someone who is neither God nor the preceptor, the guru, the acharya, the teacher, neglecting their commands and considering God as nothing more than an ordinary being. So those are some of the obstacles mentioned there, like that. So to clarify this again, we have 5 knowledges which are important for the devotee in the system of Nimbarka, which is also there in Ramanuja's system also, Artha Panchakam. So we have nature of the nature of God, the nature of the soul, right? The fruit or grace, the nature of moksha, right? The nature of the enjoyment consequent on bhakti, on devotional actions to God, and the nature of the obstacles in the way of attaining that moksha, right? So thus, it's a little bit slightly different in Ramanuja's system. Thus, we can see that the doctrine of Nimbarka has very much in common with that of Ramanuja. Both regard the difference as well as the non-difference as real. But for Nimbarka, the difference and non-difference are on the same level. They coexist and have the same importance. While for Ramanuja, non-difference is the principle. It is qualified by difference, which is thus subordinate to it. Right, so this is the slight emphasis there on in Nimbarka. Nimbarka tends to equate difference and non-difference. The problem with equating difference and non-difference is that difference and non-difference are opposites, and if you absolutely equate them, then that doesn't make a lot of sense, because they're counterintuitive, right? However, Ramanuja's idea is that non-difference is the principle issue between the 3 principles, God, the souls, and the world, like that, and Chid and Ishvara, and therefore that is the substratum. But on top of that, we have differences. We have certain differences, but those differences are subordinate to the non-difference. Another technical distinction between the 2 doctrines is that according to Ramanuja, the Chit and Achit, right, the souls and matter, which form the body of Brahman, are regarded as its attributes, also called Visheshana or Prakara, right? And hence the name Vishishtadvaita, which it is explained as the unity of Brahman qualified by Chit and Achit, right? The actual Sanskrit definition is Chid, Achid, Vishishta, Parameshvara Dvaita. Okay? So Parameshvara is the Supreme Lord, right? God. Advaita, non-difference. Chid, Achid, Vishishta, as qualified by souls and matter, right? But the school of Nimbarka refuses to admit this, that these Chit and Achit are aspects or attributes of Brahman. So for being a body does not necessarily mean being an attribute. And beside, but the Shariri Bhava is an analogy given by Ramanuja in his doctrine, like that. So anyway, Nimbarka criticizes that whole idea, right? Besides, the idea is impossible in itself. An attribute is by its nature meant to distinguish the thing that possesses the attribute from another thing which does not, which is without it. So you have a white pot and you have a black pot, right? So the white pot has whiteness as an attribute. The black pot doesn't have whiteness as an attribute, right? So, but it is, in the present case, there is nothing from which the chit and achit should distinguish the Brahman of which they are attributes. So let's hear that again. An attribute is by its nature meant to distinguish the thing that possesses the attribute from another which is without it. But in the present case, there is nothing from which chit and achit should distinguish Brahman of which they are attributes. So there's nothing else. There's nothing else. So that's, I don't know if that's a good argument, but anyway, it's an interesting argument by Nimbarka. And if chit and achit are both different and non-different from Brahman, it is ridiculous to say at the same time that there is a unity of Brahman qualified by chit and achit.
Om Namo Narayanaaya. Om Namo